Hi, this is Dave for the RacquetScience project. Before we get started, there are a few requirements before this can be run on a host machine. First, you'll need Node.js installed. Secondly, you'll need R, which is available via the CRAN project. If you download the typical binaries through CRAN and do not install RStudio, you will also need to change the write permissions for the library folder in your R installation folder. This is because the needs package and the JSON Lite packages will need to be installed, and if there's no write permission, you won't be able to install those libraries and the whole thing will crash. You will also need the data, which is available from the Tennis ATP repository from Jeff Sackman. Additionally, wherever this data is downloaded to, it will be your working directory for R, and that will need to be updated in the R scripts. Additionally, you will need MongoDB installed with a tennis database, a matches collection with the 2018 matches CSV imported, a players collection with the players imported, and a ranks collection with all of the rank data imported. Lastly, we're going to need an add-on which will allow cross-origin resource sharing because we end up accessing some external resources on a different server. We're also going to need to set up our environment variables. We also need to have a system environment variable for the R bin. In this case, I have a 64-bit machine, so I need to use the 64-bit directory. All right. So looking at the HTML, we set up the page with Bootstrap and have a large image of a tennis court overhead, which sets the backdrop. On either side of the tennis court, we'll have some players located within a media object. Within that media object, you'll have the player image, which will be retrieved via an Angular call. The rank stats data will be displayed within a panel, also set by Angular. And while this stuff loads, we also have some spinners that will come into play, just so that way, while it's loading the data, you don't think that the page is just simply crashed. Below the tennis courts is where the selections will happen. Here we've got a data list attached to an input. This will be populated by, again, another Angular call. So you'll be able to actually either type in, or you can scroll through the list to actually select one of the tennis players. In between is going to be a button. This button will actually change depending on the actual state of the page. And below that is the results table, which will be populated via Angular as well. Taking a quick look at the Angular.js, we set up a couple of tweaks just to how the page displays upon loading, and there's a few jQuery triggers that help us set basically how the page looks. For example, here in the search bar, it's looking for if the value added, if it matches the actual when it's clicked, and in this case, it will actually locate the ID of the player, because the ID is actually also tagged in with the data list object. It's just not displayed, and this way we can actually get the player ID and save it for use later. After selecting a player, there's a call over to the player select function. This will then take the actual player ID and the name, mostly the player name, and it'll send it off to the ATP World Tour website to try and get back the overview page for that player. We'll then extract out the web ID, and that is what we use to get the player picture from Pro Tennis Live. I've added in a function here because there was a particular instance where two players had the same name, junior and senior, and I was getting a bad response. So now that won't happen anymore. Let's see. Once both players have been selected, the button will be made available for clicking, and then you can click on that, and then it will start the calculate function. But before that happens, once both players are selected, there is a call made to, if I could find it. Here it is. There's a call made to populate the matches table at the bottom of the page. So clicking on that will begin the calculate function, which then processes the difference in rank between both players for both players, since one will be negative, one will be positive, and the rank points difference between both players. This information is packed up into a JSON and it's sent on to the node. Here then it'll return back an array of 2 values, which is the probability, and that's then sent, well, it's set as an Angular variable, and then the D3 is run. The D3 will then generate a radial progress bar, which was sourced from brightpointinc.com. Yes, brightpointinc.com. So taking a look at the node, we have just a few. So things that we'll definitely need in here is the MongoDB, body parser, express, cores, and definitely the R script modules. So we have a few. So upon loading the page, a call is sent over to just the get function. The get function will simply just look in the player's collection and just find all of them and return it as an array. Once you select a player, that player is then, so we get an ID it's sent over, and then we actually get their stats from the ranks.find. We're actually looking for the most recent rank, so this is what we have, date -1. We're then also going to go back into the player's database because we didn't get the birth date the first time. So we get the birth date, and then we're going to use calculate age, and the calculate age will calculate their decimal age. So when we actually go to calculate the function, we'll run this over to predict. Here we actually then load into the R. This is the call to the R script. This will load in the R script that I've prepared already. If there's a model available, it will just pull that. If the model is not available, it will then run another script to generate the model. This is why it's important to have the working directory set in these R scripts. It will then return back the array of probabilities in the order in which I received the data. So player 1 will be in position 0, player 2 will be in position 1. The matches accepts the IDs for both players, and then just makes a call over to the matches looking for both players. All right, so let's run it real fast. So we have to have cores off to start, and then once the page loads like this, we can then enable cross-origin resource sharing. The spinners will, we have to engage the node server first. Got to turn cores off or else this will happen. All right, and we get the spinner in both the center of the screen as well as in the button. All these elements here are disabled at the moment until the rest of the page fully loads. So it's returned everything. Right now we're just waiting for the Angular to populate the data list objects. So there we have all of the players in there loaded into the data list object. We can type in Nadal, and it will then limit the fields, and we have to again turn cores back on because I forgot to do this every time. We'll just erase that and then click Nadal again, and then I'll send a call out and it will get his picture along with his stats. And we can check out Federer. At this point now it'll also populate the table below of their recent results. I can click evaluate and I can look over this while it's sending the information over to R. So we can just take a quick look at that. Looks like both of these guys win a lot. Let's see if they've actually any recent losses. Oh, there's no recent losses in the 20 most recent matches. Interesting. Okay. So once the actual data is returned, it then generates this. Let's see if we can actually, oh, it's not going to change because I used the same one, so I got to wait. And then if we change this to, if we get rid of this, we then also reset the table as well as the probability and the other things. So we can bring up Djokovic next.